Well, it's always great when you can talk to a Pro Football Hall of Famer here on Sports Spectrum. When we get to do that here at the Super Bowl with Steve Largent. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Thanks for coming by the set here at Super Bowl 57, Radio Row. Let's start with kind of what this is like for you, an experience like this. When you come as a guy who was a legend in the game, you know, you've been out since, what, 89? I think 89. You said was there last year. And then you're here at, like, what this Super Bowl experience, I'm sure you've been to other Super Bowls.
Sure.
But kind of where it is now. What's your take on, like, being around here at Super Bowl 57?
Well, I mean, you talk about the Super Bowl experience or the particular teams that are playing in the Super Bowl now.
Yeah, the experience,
you know, I think it's kind of fun. It's kind of like being at the fairgrounds, you know, and getting to see different people. And I always see people that I know here at the Super Bowl, and so that's always fun to do. But yeah, it's an event. It's a big event.
Yeah. How much do you think each and every day about your career? I'm always fascinated with guys. You haven't been in the league in a long time. I'm sure you run into people every day who's like, "Hey, I watched you."
Are you saying I'm old?
I'm not. Well, I'm not saying that at all. If you want to say it, no. I'm going to be 50 this year, Steve. So I'm feeling old myself. But just how much do you sit and ponder or think about the career that you were able to have? As a man of God, too, I think, because we're always taught to have gratitude and be humble, but just thinking about the opportunities that you got to have.
You know, I am very grateful for all the opportunities that I had, because, you know, before my career in the NFL happened, I was released by the Houston Oilers.
You know, I just learned this today, that you were actually drafted by Houston.
I thought
in the Seattle from the very beginning. And you actually, there was a moment where you didn't know if you'd ever play in the NFL.
Yeah, I was driving home from Houston in my Ford little station wagon and driving home back to Tulsa where my wife was. And I didn't think I was that I would have a career in the NFL, and that's when, you know, Jerry Rome was my college coach, and then he went to Seattle the first year that they were a team. And he said, "Hey, let's get Largent up here. He knows the system. He can play," and so, you know, that started my career right there. So it was, you know, I feel like that God had His hand on me the entire time. And He took me through the getting cut in Houston, driving back home, getting the call from Seattle. That was all orchestrated by the Lord. And it definitely impacted me in my life.
I heard a story that I think you shared with Brock on his show, Brock Heward. We were talking about Brock. I think it was about going through some bitterness and unforgiveness in your life with your dad.
With my dad,
I had the same thing. And so I thought, you know, obviously we don't have the time to go that deep into it with the way the schedules are today, but how did that play a role in growing into a journey with God? Because I think sometimes that's hard when you carry some anger and some bitterness with you, to then see God as this loving Father when you struggled to have that with your own dad.
Well, you know, when my dad left when I was 6 years old, it left me as a bitter and angry person, and that made for a great football player, because I love to hit people. I love to tackle people. That was not a good motive to play football, but that for a long time, that was why I played football. But, you know, it was really a miracle, because my sophomore year in high school, I still had that bitterness in me. But I met a man named Scott Manley who worked for Young Life, who dedicated his life to young people. And he just, for some reason, came alongside me, took me to lunch. They could do that then, take me to lunch, and spent time with me. And really, he changed my life. He really introduced me to Christ, and made all the difference in the world, because my life just totally did a 180 in terms of, you know, my goals, my aspirations, my direction. That was all reversed, basically, in my relationship with Scott and the things that he was teaching me about Jesus.
We talked to your former quarterback, Jim Zorn, about a month ago on this show, and I asked him, because you guys basically came in around the same time, right?
Yeah, Jim was actually out of 75 and was with the Dallas Cowboys, and then they traded him to, or he didn't trade him, but they gave him to the Los Angeles Rams. But then the first year of the Seahawks, he came to Seattle. So he was basically in his first year He was in his second year with Seattle. I was in my first year in Seattle.
But you came in around the same time, and a man of God. Jim talked a lot about his faith. From your perspective, coming into the NFL, trying to acclimate yourself as a player, like you said, the bitterness made you a great football player, but you're also a follower of Christ. What was that like, kind of integrating this professional world of becoming, one of the great players of all time, with also being a follower of Christ and kind of mixing those two together?
Yeah, well, I think Jim would say this too, but Norm Evans was a guy that was on our team who had come from the Miami Dolphins, won Super Bowls and all that stuff, who was an offensive left tackle for us, and he organized a little Bible study that we had, and just being able to walk through life and walk through the first year of football with Norm, and just talk to him about, is this normal? Is this, the way it should be? Or do I need to be involved in this? It changed my world. It changed Jim's world. Just having that kind of reflection and somebody that had been there and done it, and just find a way to be a professional, but at the same time be a believer.
As you started having a lot of success, and obviously you're in the Hall of Fame, so you had a ton of success. What was it like trying to stay humble, trying to stay grounded as a believer when a lot of people are telling you how great Steve Largent is? What was that like?
Well, I tell you, without a doubt, this is an easy question to answer, and that's because my wife was the person that was able to keep my head on my shoulders. And she never would allow me to start thinking more of myself than I really should have. And then I started having kids too. So I was 27, 28, 29, 30, had 4 kids, and that's a way to keep you humble as well.
Oh yeah, our kids will look at us and just see Dad. They don't look at us and see whatever accolades that we've had. They just see you as Dad. As you started to wind down your career, were you prepared after '89 for a post? I mean, you ended up going into politics and like having a lot of success post playing. But I've talked to a lot of guys, even the best players of all time, who say, "Man, that was hard adjusting to that post playing career because you're so regimented and so routine based in how you went about your life, and suddenly." It's over.
Right. Yeah, I think it was difficult for sure, but it wasn't as difficult as probably for most players because I played for 14 years. I mean, that is a heck of a long career.
Yes.
For any position, much less wide receiver. So I got to play as much as I could, much as I wanted to, and then so the transition was much easier for me. In fact, I announced at the beginning of the season, this is my last year, and I said it and I did it.
And you stuck with it.
Yeah, so there was no doubt I wasn't coming back for 15. So because the Seahawks really didn't have a very good team by the end of my career, and they didn't have a good team the year after my career either. So it was an easier transition from that perspective. And if they were going to the Super Bowl next year, I might have had some regrets, but they didn't. But yeah, it was not that bad for me, and I found some interesting things to do during the season, so to speak.
Of course.
But I started speaking to a number of different people in Seattle and other places around the country, and I really enjoyed that. But then the speaking actually was a great prelude to being in politics because you got to speak all the time. So that made it an easier transition. But I didn't ever want to be in politics. That was something my wife thought of.
Interesting.
And so I said, look, I'll run one time, and when I lose, I'm not running again. And she said, okay. And she said, so I put $50,000 of my own money into my campaign and started running for office in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the 1st Congressional District, and ended up winning. So I shocked myself. So then I'm in politics, and that was a great learning experience as well. I mean, people talk about politics and how bad it is and all that stuff, but I didn't find it that way. And I found some great people, Republicans, Democrats alike, to work with, and so I really enjoyed my time there. I loved being in politics, but I just knew what happened was after my last term, I ran for governor and lost. And that was
close race.
It was 5,000 votes or less difference. But I lost, and that was the end, because I wasn't going to run for politics again. Anyway, that was the end. Yeah, it did.
He is Steve Largent, the Pro Football Hall of Famer. He's joining us here on Sports Spectrum at Radio Row at the Super Bowl. Your faith in God, you talked about it, your love for the Lord. You're here representing He Gets Us. And I remember watching, I think it was a football game, probably in October or something like that, and all of a sudden this Jesus commercial comes on. And I'm fascinated by it. I'm like, did I just see what I just saw? I talked to my wife. I was like, wait a minute. Did that actually just happen on the commercial of an NFL game? And now it's gotten to the point where I think it's got a lot of people talking, and it's made an opportunity for He Gets Us to make an appearance and potentially bring Christ into the conversation at the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Can you believe that?
It's unbelievable.
I've never seen it happen before. I mean, in all my years of playing in the league or watching the league beyond that, and I've never seen it happen before, and it's happening now. And it's funded by a variety of people. Yeah. It's not funded by churches or religious groups or political groups or anything like that. It's just a group of people that got together and said, "Hey, let's do this," and it's fantastic. So I'm really excited about it. I haven't seen the commercials yet, so I don't even know what they look like either.
I don't either. So just the ones I saw early on. But the Super Bowl commercials are going to be interesting.
I think so too. I think so too.
It's interesting to think about their MO, if you will, too. It's not about a certain religion or a way of belief or a denomination. It's literally just talking about who Christ is and why He really understands and can help us in our everyday life.
Yeah.
How has He helped you, and especially where you are today, having lived a lot more of a life than maybe when you were a football player, in terms of how Christ has helped you in your life?
Well, the tagline too is His confounding love and forgiveness. And when I think about Jesus, I think about how much He loves me and how much He's forgiven me.
Yes.
And so I am forever grateful for that. But it's changed my life totally. From the minute I accepted Christ when I was a sophomore, Scott Manley, to this very day. It's changed my wife's life, and it's changed our family's life. In great ways. Now that doesn't mean that we haven't had problems. We had our fourth child who was born with spina bifida, lifelong medical concern that he has. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have it easy.
Of course.
But it may not be easy, but you have a Savior.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it.
He walks with you.
Walks with you.
That's the beautiful thing
Every
about
step.
it. HeGetsUs.com is the website. He is Steve Largent, the Pro Football Hall of Famer. Real quick, before we say goodbye, when you played on the Seahawks, they were in the AFC.
They're
now in the
AFC
NFC.
West. Right.
That's right.
NFC
They were in the AFC West. So you now have Kansas City Chiefs from the AFC West, and you have the Eagles, where the Seahawks are now an NFC team. How does that work for Steve Largent in terms of what he's thinking about for the Super Bowl?
Well, I'm a free agent. No, I really think. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, if he is totally healthy and can turn it on, he's hard to stop.
He alone, right? Yeah,
right.
Just to keep them in the game.
But I think the Eagles have built their team the old-fashioned way, which is a great offensive line and a great defensive line.
Yeah.
And that's how you win Super Bowls.
Yep.
So if you had to press me, I'd say the Eagles will win in a close game.
Yeah.
But you never can tell.
Imagine catching passes from Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Oh, my gosh.
That'd be fun.
Incredible. Listen, he is Steve Largent, the Pro Football Hall of Famer. Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Appreciate it.